Good morning and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I am Lati Akiri-Duwale, the headlines. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg insists it's up to Ukraine to decide how much territory it trades for peace. Amnesty International accuses Russia of war crimes in Kharkiv, allegedly killing hundreds. And rebranded McDonald's restaurants reopen in Russia under a new name. We begin this morning with more from the information as given out by NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who says that the US-led alliance aims to strengthen Ukraine's position at the negotiating table, but added that any peace deal would involve compromises, including of territory. Mr. Stoltenberg spoke at the Kolkaranta talks in Finland following a meeting with Finnish President Sauli Niinistö. While the NATO chief says that the West was willing to, quote, pay a price to strengthen the Ukrainian military, Kiev will have to make some territorial concessions to Moscow in order to end the current conflict. According to him, security concerns raised by Turkey in its opposition to Finnish and Swedish NATO membership applications are legitimate. Mr. Stoltenberg, visiting Finland, says it was important to note that no other NATO ally had suffered more terrorist attacks than Turkey, and that therefore its concerns needed to be taken seriously.
The summit in Madrid was never a deadline. At the same time, I would like to see this solved as soon as possible, and therefore we are working hard with our NATO ally Turkey, and also with Finland and Sweden to address those issues that Turkey has raised. And these are legitimate concerns. This is about terrorism, it's about weapons exports. And we have to understand and remember that no other NATO ally has suffered more terrorist attacks than Turkey. And I therefore also welcome the clear message from Finland and from President Sauli Niinistö and Sweden that actually they are ready to sit down to address those issues and then to find a way forward. It is the right decision for Finland and Sweden to apply for membership. That will strengthen their security, it will strengthen NATO, and it will strengthen security and stability throughout the Euro-Atlantic area.
We have been surprised by the position of Turkey, but as in international politics, it is all the reasons to take seriously what your counterpart is saying. And that's what we are going to do, take seriously what Turkey puts forward.
At the same meeting, Finnish President Sauli Niinistö says Finland will not join the US-led NATO bloc without Sweden, so the latter run into an impasse on its accession path. Finland and Sweden have scrambled to join NATO amidst the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. While both Nordic nations have maintained close ties and military cooperation with the US-led bloc for decades already, they have remained neutral countries.
First, we have of solving this issue in Madrid.
Amnesty International has accused Russia of war crimes in Ukraine, saying attacks on the second-largest city, Kharkiv, many using banned cluster bombs, had killed hundreds of civilians. In a report titled "Anybody Can Die at Any Time," the rights group says the repeated bombardments of residential neighborhoods in Kharkiv are indiscriminate attacks which killed and injured hundreds of civilians and as such constitute war crimes. Amnesty says it had uncovered proof in Kharkiv of the repeated use by Russian forces of 9 N210 and 9 N235 cluster bombs and scatterable landmines, all of which are banned under international conventions. We are learning more about the situation in Severodonetsk. Its regional governor, Serhiy Haidai, says that the city will be, quote, cut off from the rest of Ukraine if Russia destroys the last remaining bridge into it. According to him, fighting continues in Severodonetsk, where the situation remains extremely difficult after the Russian army destroyed a second bridge into the city and has been heavily bombarding the last one. The regional governor says the destruction of a second bridge across a river to the neighboring city of Lysychansk indicates Russia is determined to completely cut off Severodonetsk. He said most likely today or tomorrow they will throw in all their reserves to try and capture the city, or maybe to other areas in order to cut off and finally control the Lysychansk-Bakhmut road. The governor of Luhansk, in the meantime, says 3 people were killed in Lysychansk, including a 6-year-old boy, and 1 person was injured. In a Telegram post, Mr. Hedai says Russian forces continue to storm the city of Severodonetsk and have pushed the Ukrainian army back due to a significant advantage in artillery, adding that Russians were destroying the city quarter by quarter. A spokesman for the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces says Russian forces had pushed Ukrainian units out of Severodonetsk city center. And in his traditional late-night video address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia was deploying poorly trained conscripts and those gathered by covert mobilization to the eastern region of Donbas. President Zelensky says Moscow's tactics had not changed in the war and that poorly trained Russian reserves were now being deployed in the battle for Donbas, where every meter is being fought over. He says Russia was also pressing towards nearby cities such as Lysychansk, Bakhmut, and Sloviansk. He once again called on world leaders to provide Ukraine with modern missile defense systems, citing the casualties from the latest missile attack on western Ukraine. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also says Russian casualties since the start of the war may now have passed 40,000 in June. He also reiterated Ukraine's call for advanced air defense systems from the West, adding that such defenses could have averted many tragedies, including an air attack on Ternopil yesterday, in which 10 people remain in hospital, including a 12-year-old girl. The former commander of Ukraine's Azov National Guard Regiment says the bodies of scores of Ukrainian fighters killed during the siege of Azovstal steelworks in the southern city of Mariupol are still awaiting retrieval. Maxim Zorin explains that under the terms of a recent exchange, around 220 bodies of those killed in Azovstal had already been sent to Kiev, but just as many bodies still remain in Mariupol. He said a third of the dead were of the Azov battalion, while the others belonged to border patrol and naval officers as well as the police. Hundreds of fighters holed up in the steelworks were taken into Russian custody in mid-May, but many were also killed during Russian attacks on the plant and the city of Mariupol. He says the DNA testing and servicemen's uniforms and insignia would be used to help with the identification. Ukrainian authorities say a grain storage facility in the Black Sea port of Mykolaiv has been left in charred ruins after it was shelled by Russian military. Local media say the shelling hit a warehouse where sunflower meal was stored. Piles of sunflower seed meal could still be seen smoldering in the harbor a week after the shelling, and a fire truck was on standby to put out new fires in the rubble. Ukraine's Deputy Agriculture Minister Taras Vysovsky says up to 300,000 tons of grain may have been stored in warehouses destroyed by Russian shelling last weekend. Mykolaiv is home to one of Ukraine's largest agricultural commodities terminal, the Niinistö grain terminal. And in Ternopil, its governor has released images to show the aftermath of a rocket attack on the city of Shortkiv. The images posted on Vladimir Trush's social media page showed buildings with shattered windows and destroyed cars parked amongst debris said to be caused in an attack over the weekend. The location of the images was verified by buildings that matched satellite imagery. Trush said 4 missiles had hit the city 75 kilometers south of Ternopil on Saturday, partly destroying a military facility and injuring 23 people. For civilians who stayed behind in their villages along the front lines in the Donbas, the fighting between Russia and Ukraine poses a new threat. Shelling and firing of rockets nearby sets their fields on fire and could destroy their crops. With a dry and hot summer approaching, the risk is even higher. Constant shelling and exchange of fire leaves a trail of smoke and destruction in its wake, threatening people's livelihoods in the embattled east. Lyubia, a local resident, watched on as a fire blazed along the field she was standing on. The city of Severodonetsk has become the epicenter of the battle for control of Ukraine's eastern region of Donbass. The governor of Luhansk says Ukrainian and Russian forces were still fighting street by street there. Let's speak now to Dennis Rivers, a researcher at the Institute of Security Studies, ISS. He joins us virtually from Pretoria in South Africa. Dennis is, of course, originally from Ukraine. Good morning to you, Dennis. Thank you for your time. Welcome.
Welcome. Good morning. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me again.
Let's begin. There seem to be two major shifts that we're reporting this morning. The first is that NATO seems to be implying that it is going to accept that for this war to end, there will need to be concessions of both sides, including of territory. That's the first one. The second is that Finland says it will not join NATO without Sweden. So let's take the first one. The concession of territory. This was what this war was about all along. Ukraine said it would not give up an inch of its territory to Russia. But NATO, which has been one of the main backers for Ukraine, now seems to be shifting its position. Could this have any effect on the ground and on the Ukrainians?
It's a good question. I mean, we need to look at sort of the broader picture. When we discuss the land, what land are we discussing? Are we discussing the new territories that were captured by Russia starting from the February 24th in the south? Or are we discussing, for instance, Crimea that has been annexed in 2014? Or are we discussing, Donetsk and Lugansk? So there's obviously various degrees to that. I think it's a very complicated question for a number of reasons. Of course, NATO, I think the NATO position is there to ease the pressure from Zelensky in case there is this pressure to send a message that it's up to Ukraine to make a decision. However, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is in a bit of a more difficult situation. Any sort of concession will be not seen in a good light by the Ukrainian people. Obviously, especially when it comes to the territories that were captured recently by Russia. It is a very difficult question also in terms of military capacity that Ukraine has to take the territories back. We see that right now, despite the heavy fighting in the east and some counteroffensives in the south, we see that Ukraine currently doesn't have the capacity to really take the territory back by force, especially when it comes to Crimea. So it will very much depend on the situation in the east, particularly in the east, where Russia is now amassing troops to start another offensive against the city of Sloviansk, and that should happen over the next week or so. If Russia is successful, we may see a stronger negotiation position for Russia, which may force Ukraine to make concessions. However, if the West rallies more against Ukraine and sends more supplies, we may see a counteroffensive later in the year. We may see a different situation. There's no set rules as of yet. It's difficult to say, but it's definitely a very complicated question.
This gives more ammunition to those who said that the Western allies, speaking of NATO and the EU in particular, were using Ukraine as a staging board, that they wanted Ukraine to be where Russia wore itself out, and that they weren't really believers in the fight for Ukrainian sovereignty, which is why they haven't put troops on the ground. They're not enforcing a low-fly zone. And now they are talking after 4 or 5 months, after 3 or 4 months, they're talking now about Ukraine possibly giving up some kind of territory. In this case, it is NATO saying that. And now you've just talked about the fact that Ukraine doesn't really have the capacity. It doesn't have the capacity because in spite of repeated requests, the West has refused to give it the necessary weapons to go on the offensive.
I think we also need to be, I guess, careful about the way we say, frame the West in this regard. I mean, we have countries like the UK and the US, which were quite proactive in terms of supplying weapons and necessary training, equipment. And then we have countries like Germany that were a bit more cautious, especially in terms of supplying European-made or German-made weapons, modern weapons to Ukraine. So in this regard, the same goes for instance, political backing. So countries, European countries and NATO countries, including Poland, Czech Republic, the Baltic states, were quite active from the start, from the get-go, and were supporting Ukraine politically and diplomatically, whereas it seems that countries in the West initially, in Western Europe initially, were doubtful of Ukraine's ability to fight back against Russia. And when they've realized that Ukraine or the Kyiv will not be captured in the next couple of days, as was predicted, they realized that perhaps they need to up their support. However, it seems from the messages we were getting from Germany, for instance, there's a bit of a concern in terms of overextending the support for Ukraine. There is this concern about humiliating Putin and pushing Putin to take more extreme steps. It seems that Germany, in particular, are quite aware about the risks associated with sort of pushing Putin into a corner and forcing him to look for more drastic solutions to get out of this conflict. So, as we know, Scholz and Macron, the presidents of Germany and President of France, respectively, are set to visit Ukraine over the next 2 weeks, and I think a lot will be clarified when they do visit. It seems that they are coming to suggest some sort of a conditions to Ukraine, some sort of a solution that they will propose to Ukraine, and that will very much dictate the remainder of this conflict, what will happen.
Well, let's talk about the other big shift that I mentioned at the start of our conversation, which is the fact that Finland has now said that if Sweden gets into any kind of trouble or some hurdles on the way to getting into NATO, then it will not join NATO. So it's either both of us join or none of us join. Is this a strategic move on their part? And especially against the fact that NATO now seems to accept the fact that Turkey's opposition to their membership is legitimate, is not simply a bargaining tool.
I still believe that as a NATO, because Turkey is a NATO member as opposed to Sweden and Finland, NATO's position on this issue has to be diplomatic, and it has to reflect the fact that Turkey is a member state. However, I still believe that this is a bargaining chip. It is an attempt to get the most out of this situation, whereas as we know, Turkey, in a private conversation with the president of Finland, Turkey has confirmed, Erdogan has confirmed his willingness to accept both Sweden and Finland as members. And the moment they applied for the membership, Turkey came out against it, citing the conditions. So I still believe it is a bargaining chip. It would not make sense for Turkey to lose this opportunity to get their national interests, to achieve their national interests. With regard to the Sweden and Finland either being members together or not, it's actually a common position they had even before they applied for NATO membership. Even before they applied, the condition was that Sweden will apply if Finland applies, and they're both joined together. They have a very close relationship, historic relationship. However, it is important to know that both countries have received assurances when they applied that the Article 5, one of the most important articles of the NATO treaty, will apply to them in the sense that the countries pledge to defend them. So for all intents and purposes, we can say that at this moment, the most important treaty applies to the two countries already, and they are covered by this umbrella. And countries, Western countries and NATO countries will come to their support in case they are attacked. So if the process takes longer than expected, if it is a prolonged process, regardless, we can say that for all intents and purposes, it doesn't really change the realities on the ground. And I still believe that both countries will join NATO in due course.
At the start of our conversation, I did reference the fact that you are originally from Ukraine, and I do presume that you are still in touch with relatives and friends. So I'm going to end the interview on a personal note. Are you in touch with home, and what's it like when you speak to those that you still have back there?
I'm in touch, and I must say it is a very difficult reality on the ground, and it's still very difficult to comprehend. I've heard a lot of personal stories from the people I'm talking to, from people who had to make their way through the forest to escape Russian attack and the invasion and the start of the war because of the shelling, people sleeping in the basements. There are people who still live in the currently occupied territories in Ukraine and the east. And without going to details, I can say that they told me about some of the crimes being committed. In the first day of the invasion in the east, an elderly couple was shot in front of the house, and they were left there dead for the whole day because nobody could come out and basically help them. People were afraid. So there's a lot. It's a very difficult. It's a very difficult situation. At the same time, I'm very interested to see how this war, for the lack of a better word, this war brought people together. I'm seeing people rallying behind each other, people supporting each other. I'm seeing the civil society, the rise of civil society in Ukraine, which is inspiring and gives hope really for the brighter future after the war. So it is a very difficult situation.
I do fully appreciate and understand that, and one can only hope that Godspeed and good luck continues to attend your relatives back in Ukraine. Dennis River, thank you so much for your time and perspective this morning. Thanks for staying tuned. A U.S. National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, John Kirby, says Russian President Vladimir Putin absolutely has weaponized food by blockading grain exports out of Ukraine. Russia's war in Ukraine could push up to 49 million people into famine or famine-like conditions because of its devastating impact on global food supply and prices. Countries are scrambling to find a way around the blockade. Kirby said the administration of U.S. President Joe Biden and partner nations are working to overcome an export blockade that's causing the food shortage. According to him, we're going to feel some of that probably here as well, which is why we're working so hard on trying to find out alternative routes to get some of that grain out. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister said it was unacceptable for a Canadian official to have attended Russia Day celebrations at the country's embassy in Ottawa. A deputy protocol chief in Canada's Global Affairs Department, Yasmin Heinberger, attended the event last week, along with representatives of Egypt, Pakistan, and some African nations. Melanie Joly says no Canadian representative should have attended the event hosted at the Russian embassy, and no Canadian representative will attend this kind of event again. Joly also reiterated Canada's support for Ukraine against Russia's invasion. Joining me in the studio now is David Kashoido, who is a medical student going to his 5th year and who successfully returned from Ukraine to Nigeria. He's been on the show and we're keeping tabs on his progress. Welcome, David.
Thank you, sir.
You were telling me some things, so I'm going to ask you again.
Yes,
today is a public holiday. There isn't school.
No, I'm done with school for the year, sir.
Good. So you're done, and so what's next?
So the original plan was to find some other schools to continue my study because we don't know what's going to happen. Right. So my parents, we've been checking some schools. Right. Some have given some feedback. Right. But we can't actually go through it without transcripts. To be honest, I actually got an admission to another school. Good. But they said I have to start from 1st year, which doesn't really make sense because
Which means you've lost 5 years.
Yes, because I'm going to my 5th year, and they said I have to start from 1st year. And I understand because they said I don't have my official transcript.
So there's no evidence that you've done anything?
Yes, there's no evidence that. It's just like a report card like my school sent to me, but it doesn't really mean anything to them. So we need like official transcript.
Why don't you have a transcript? Why is it impossible to get a transcript?
Yeah, my school is making it very impossible. So we asked, not only me, a lot of them, the Indians, the Egyptians, all of us, we asked for a transcript because we want to see the possibility of getting other schools, but our school said it's that we have to get expelled from the school, and to get expelled, they were like, we need to be present in Lviv to do all this.
You need to return
back to
Lviv.
Yes.
To get expelled.
Yes, sir. Either that, or you, if you want someone to have your transcript, someone that's in Lviv, you have to like get power of attorney, and the process is long. You have to first write a letter, then you take the letter to the Ukrainian embassy in the country you're staying. They have to translate it, and the letter has to come back to school. They have to approve it. And
who would you be giving this power of attorney? I mean, let's just assume that you can do all these things you've mentioned. You can write it, it can be translated, it can... Who would you be giving a power of attorney to? To me, I don't know. I don't know who exactly is still in Ukraine that like that you can give such a power to.
Yes, sir. So that's the problem we are facing now, and it's not easy for like anyone because we keep asking, and they are answering like selectively answering our questions. Because even my mom was so like agitated, she had to like ask for like their number, so I gave her, and she send a message, no response, or she reads, no response. So it's like everyone is asking and they keep selectively responding, or they keep saying that you get expelled. And like majority of can't get expelled because it doesn't make sense getting expelled. It's
being expelled is a disciplinary procedure. It means you've done something wrong.
Yes, sir.
That's why you would be expelled.
Yes, sir.
And being expelled would presuppose that all the advantages that come with having gone to that school, possibly including a transcript, are also being given up by being expelled because it is a disciplinary procedure.
Yes, sir.
Have you guys gone to the Ukrainian embassy in Nigeria?
No, I haven't. I don't know who has, but I don't think so, sir.
Perhaps it's an option because some of these things are option, or even the Nigerian Foreign Affairs Ministry.
I would presume maybe the Nigerian Foreign Affairs could help, like to. Because the transcript, to collect transcript, it's not a difficult process because everyone does. I have a friend that came back from Russia. She was in Russia, but she came back, but she asked for like her transcript and a year deferment, and that was not a problem for her. But why is it that because of the whole situation, and it's only foreign students that it's really affecting? Because also the final year students can't get their certificates because, like, minding us that, okay, we still have to go to school. The final year students have to get a certificate and their transcript, but it's very impossible for them. They're still giving them the same condition that you have to return their temporary residence, you have to return the books the school gave them. But that's not the main thing. They have finished. And there are no options for you to return the books they gave you to the Ukrainian embassy in Nigeria and return your permit and so on there. The permit are with us, but the books we didn't carry because we were all trying to escape. That was not quite the priority at the time. Yes, sir. So the books are still in school, but like they are making it so difficult, and like people are getting frustrated, and we don't know because we asked our teacher, okay, school is meant to resume 1st of September, and we asked, okay, doctor, if the whole war continues, because I'm going to 5th year, and I don't need to be doing online. It's not good. It's not a physical thing. You need to be there, yes, sir, going through it, many practicals and all that. Yes, sir, because I did my 4th year online, and it wasn't so good. But 5th year, 6th year, I need to be offline. And I need to go there. And if my school is saying we are going to go back offline, it's probably going to be for another year again. And they are saying, oh, if the school doesn't start 1st of September, oh, it starts middle of September, oh, or in October. So they are not sure. Yeah, of course. Yes. I mean, you know why they are not sure. Yeah, I understand from their point of view, they're not sure, they're having a war. But like they shouldn't limit it that, okay, because we are not there, that they won't also like help us out or things like that, sir. The way it's coming across, what you said you had a group, and there are quite a number of you, both within and outside Nigeria. You mentioned the Egyptians and so on. When you talk within this group, do they offer any kind of advice as to what they are trying to do in their own countries that may be applicable to you that is in Nigeria? Because for all practical purposes, what you're saying is like you're stuck.
and you're stuck, it doesn't have a timeline, it doesn't have a deadline, it's until whenever.
Yes, sir.
So do you have this kind of conversations with any of these, your colleagues who have pointed in any direction?
No, they are
as stuck as you?
Yes, all we need is because they keep asking every day that we need the transcript, because some of them have probably tried to apply for schools, different schools, and they need the transcript, they need the transcript, they need the transcript. The only one I'm probably thinking is a Polish girl that, because she's from Poland, so she was able to move to her country to continue, but she had to get expelled. But I don't think that was like a difficult, because she's in Poland. So, but all other students, they need, even if you want to go to university in your school, you do need transcripts.
Right.
So they keep asking for transcript, and is that the doctors on the platform don't answer, or they keep saying expelled. And
David, this is truly a grim situation. We'll keep up with it. Perhaps, as I said, you could try with the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, yes, to see what they could do, or indeed the Ukrainian embassy in Nigeria, which I think is in Abuja. But as I said, we'll keep up with you and continue to see what it is that you're making by way of progress. David Koshedo is a returning fifth-year medical student from Ukraine, who is now back in Nigeria, and we're hearing about what the situation is with him, and not just him, with others like him in different parts of the world who managed to escape Ukraine. Thank you, David.
Thank you, sir.
Kiev's deputy foreign minister said that Ukraine has established 2 routes through Poland and Romania to export grain and avert a global food crisis, although bottlenecks have slowed the supply chain. Dmytro Senik says global food security was at risk because Russia's invasion of Ukraine had altered Kiev's Black Sea grain exports, causing widespread shortages and soaring prices. Ukraine is the world's 4th largest grain exporter, and it says there are some 30 million tons of grain stored in its territory, which it is trying to export via road, river, and a rail. Senik says Ukraine was in talks with Baltic states to add a 3rd corridor for food exports, but did not give details on how much grain has already moved or would be moved through these routes.
First of all, Ukraine is known to be a global contributor to food security, and we're doing our best to ensure that those 22 million tons of grain that are now blocked in the ports, in the Ukrainian seaports, blocked by Russia, will reach their destination. There are several ports that are under Russian occupation, and Russian army is now stealing this grain, trying to sell it elsewhere. For the port of Odessa, which is under the control of Ukraine, as it is not operable now, we are using alternative routes with the help of our friends and partners, namely Romania, Poland, and Baltic states. We found 2 routes, we established 2 routes which help us export these agricultural commodities. I do not have any numbers now, and those routes are not perfect because it creates certain bottleneck, but we are doing our best to develop those routes in the meantime. Well, this is yet another violation of the international law. Not only they are trying to distribute passports, which are now toxic, but also they are kidnapping our people, bringing them to the Russian territory. I think that one of the messages during the Shangri-La dialogue that we all learned is that in the 21st century, this kind of aggression that Russia wages on Ukraine, this kind of war, is unacceptable. And also security, global security, cannot be fragmented by a region.
And 3 months after McDonald's suspended operations in Russia, hundreds of people streamed into its famous former outlet in Moscow's Pushkin Square as the restaurant reopened under a Russian owner and a new name. The logo is different, but still evokes the golden arches, a circle, and 2 yellow oblongs representing a beef patty and French fries. It was not until a couple of hours before the Pushkin Square restaurant opened that the Russian chain's new name was announced. It's called Tasty, and that's it. Oleg Parev, the chain's general director, said he aims to have 200 of them open by the end of this month. McDonald's sold its 850 restaurants to businessman Alexander Govor, who held licenses for 25 franchises in Siberia. And scores of people queued outside what was formerly McDonald's flagship restaurant. The outlet sported a new logo, a stylized burger with 2 fries, plus a slogan reading, "The name changes, love stays." The queue was significantly larger, or rather smaller than the thousands of people who thronged to the original McDonald's opening there in 1990 during the Soviet era. Okay, we'll take a break because I was going to go straight to Ini John Mekwa to talk about this tasty lead. But when we return, Ukrainian police deliver food aid to Lishank's residents. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. And just before the break, I was talking about something about the queues outside the new rebranded former McDonald's. And there are quite a number of people. There were quite a number of people there, even though nothing like the crowds that were seen in 1990. But that's just one of the business stories unfolding from the war in Ukraine this morning. Joining me, as usual, is Ini John Mekwa. Ini, morning.
I like the way you said it's rebranded and new. And
yes, but I mean former McDonald's.
Former McDonald's.
I'm wondering, again, this is an attempt by Russia to be self-sufficient.
Yes.
The new owner has tried to do everything possible to leave everything the way it is.
But not everything, because some of the reviews is, I think because McDonald's is known for burger, you know, so they have tried to keep the burger that way, but the drinks and some other ingredients are not really the way it used to be. And that's why if you read some of the reviews, some people are saying, bring back our McDonald's, and we know that
yes,
that's not
going to happen anytime soon.
That's not going to happen anytime. I mean, because McDonald's has said this is an exit they are doing. But I mean, McDonald's is taking a big fall from this, and not just McDonald's. Most of those major companies, they are going to lose about $59 billion leaving Russia. We talked about ExxonMobil and a whole lot of ICT companies. You know, they are really taking a big fall, and it's all in solidarity, you know, with Ukraine against the war. So it's not coming cheap. But at least this is what one price that they have to pay, because after all, the world is actually paying for it. We're talking about inflation everywhere now.
Yeah, and we're talking about food prices,
exactly.
food crisis, and insecurity and all of that. Now, again, in an attempt to stay self-sufficient, the Russian national carrier Aeroflot is trying to raise some 3 billion euros in an emergency share issue. Over the weekend, I was reading that they're placing an order for 300 Russian-made planes, which would probably be able to get them past the sanctions for foreign aircraft. All of this, is it having any effect, do you think?
Obviously. So remember we talked about an emergency fund on Friday?
Yes.
So that's where they're hoping to draw this money from. But already Aeroflot, they have 187 made up their fleet, aircraft made up their fleet. Guess what? 177 was being run by Airbus, and you know, so it's really a big hit for them at this time. So even if they are trying, and they had, for instance, they had a contract with Manchester. It was supposed to be like the official carrier of the team. Of course, all those contracts are gone. So, you know, income is really, really low there. That's why they have to turn
to... And then passenger numbers are also down.
Down, of course. I think a third of what they normally used to have. And they don't have services. They don't have the personnel. They don't have the parts, because the parts used to be supplied by the Western world. You know, so all of this is cut, and so the aviation sector is in very dire needs. And that's why a lot of people say that the ruble is doing very well at this time. The economy seems to be picking up. In fact, on Friday, they had to cut their interest rate when others
when everybody else is
raising. And inflation is up everywhere. But, you know, all this is being buffered by the emergency fund, and then they have another fund they call the National Wealth Fund they're using to buffer some of this. But for how long? And if truly the EU European countries can actually cut off. You know, because most of the
gas,
money, the
most
oil
of
and
money
gas,
from oil and gas.
is from
yeah.
oil and gas. So if they can actually do that, then where are they going to get the fund? Even the new planes that they're talking about, you need the expertise, the skills. We still talk about the depth in the ICT,
Absolutely.
the skills ICT in Russia. I mean, we haven't heard that they've been able to get up their social space, social media space.
Yeah, even though you did tell us about an attempt, several attempts
you know,
to do,
we haven't really heard that.
Traction.
Exactly. So, I mean, the sanctions are having impacts, even though, yes, the economy is looking really well and the ruble is, in fact, I think they've called it the best performing at this time.
which is ironic and paradoxical because everybody thought that with all the sanctions.
Exactly.
And indeed, it looked like that in the first week or two of the war.
Until they got their acts together.
Yes.
You know, the truth is, when you read, go through Russia, it will look like Russia saw this coming, or President Putin always had a game plan somewhere, because they had this emergency fund. Yes, they have this emergency, but they always had the National Wealth Fund and another fund that they always kept, you know, to say, oh, just in case revenue from oil and gas dwindles, we're going to turn to this to take care of the people. You know, so they have like a really strong strategy to cater and buffer the economy in case of sanctions and some other unfriendly environments and factors, which is what we are seeing now. So that's really helping Russia to hold up the economy, even if it's for a temporary, you
basis,
know.
Yes. And there's a lesson in that for a lot of people, including
Nigeria.
Including you know who. Now, U.S. President Biden has banned Americans from buying Russian stocks and bonds.
Well, let me ask you, did you ever think that Americans would still be buying Russian stock? I mean, when I saw that, honestly, I was shocked because
they were just making it formal, I guess.
No, Americans were actually still buying Russian bonds in the secondary markets. They were actually still buying it, I guess, because, you know, of course, when demand goes down because of the sanctions, then prices go down. Exactly. So it was an opportunity for some people to get into it. I was shocked. I thought Americans would be like, we don't want anything to do with Russians.
Money is money.
I guess, I know, right? It doesn't have Russia or America
on it. It's just money. It's just money. And I guess there'll be those who will be looking at it and say, look, even in war, there's money to be made.
Exactly, there's money, there's a company to run and everything. So President Biden is saying, well, they can sell to non-Americans. In case you already have, you can sell, but you cannot buy again and stuff like that.
It's getting tighter, the noose is getting tighter, but then the Russians are proving equally adept at all of this. And all that one can say is one hopes that this comes to an end.
We really do hope, honestly, we do.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you, Ini. There'll be more of this, of course, on Business Morning and Business Incorporated. Business Morning is right after this show, and Business Incorporated is later at 1:30. Let's take a look at some of the sports news that has emanated this morning from the war. Daniil Medvedev has replaced Novak Djokovic at the top of the world rankings in tennis 2 weeks before Wimbledon, where he will not be allowed to compete due to a ban on Russian players. The Russian suffered a shock defeat by Dutch wildcard Tim van Rijthoven in the final of the Libem Open in the Netherlands, losing 6-4, 6-1 in 65 minutes yesterday. Medvedev became the first player other than Djokovic, Rafael Nadal, Roger Federer or Andy Murray to top the rankings since American Andy Roddick 18 years ago, when he briefly replaced Djokovic as #1 in February. World Anti-Doping Agency President Witold Banker has revealed that they are, quote, keeping an open line of communication with Russia in spite of the invasion of Ukraine to ensure they do not give a free pass to cheats. Most Russian athletes are currently banned from competing in international competition because of the war, but Banker says the country's anti-doping efforts are continuing to be monitored. Banker also told delegates attending the symposium in Lausanne, Switzerland, that the agency is trying to ensure Ukrainian athletes who have fled their country are being tested on a regular basis so that the integrity of the anti-doping program is maintained during conflicts. And finally, Ukraine's police officers delivered humanitarian food kits to residents of a remote district in Lysychansk city, the National Police of Ukraine said in a statement on social media. Video released by the police showed police officers driving to the residential area in eastern Ukraine's Lysychansk, bringing boxes with food to residents. A Ukrainian police officer said in the video that the Luhansk region police, during patrolling, will distribute humanitarian aid in the form of food kits to residents of remote areas of the former glass factory. Police officers explained to citizens what products they would find in the humanitarian boxes and asked them to divide it fairly among all the residents of the various buildings. In total, police officers managed to provide food packages to about 800 citizens, along with nappies for babies and pregnant women living in the area. Thanks for staying with us. That's our package this morning. There'll be an update in the course of the world today at 5 o'clock. Do join us for that. I'm Ladi Akiri Delwale. Do have yourselves a good balance of the Democracy Day celebrations. Good morning.